So last week was the United Nations Behavioral Science Week. It took place across 46 UN entities, and there were 15 events throughout the week. Behavioral science, if you haven't heard of it, if you watch UK Column, you've heard about it several times because of Brian's wonderful coverage about applied behavioral psychology, which is an example of behavioral science, is part of what is called UN version 2.0. This was originally covered on the 31st of July, 2023 edition of UK Column News, if you would like to go back and get the basics. But essentially, the policy, according to the website of UN 2.0, says that halfway to 2030, the world is not on track to achieve the SDGs. To accelerate progress, everyone needs to rethink, refocus, and recharge. UN 2.0 is a vision of a modernized UN system, cutting edge skills, and forward thinking culture that enable UN entities to better contribute to the quest for the SDGs. These ongoing internal transformations are designed around a quintet of change. Now, personally, I love music. This is not a musical quintet, but the quintet that it defines, that are 5 steps to this change, are innovation, data, digital, which includes helping with inclusive online education platforms, foresight, and finally, of course, behavioral science, enabling better choices. They call it BSCI, BESCI, and they have a hashtag that they use. That's kind of their shortcut. So what happened in Behavioral Science Week? Well, they were all webinars from as far as I could tell. I watched some of them just so that you don't have to. I don't like to do that to the viewers, but there will be a link in the show notes if you would like to see some things. I've got a short clip from one of the sessions that was called Getting Started with Behavioral Science. This took place on Wednesday last week. The speaker here is Sonia Guerrero, and she said she works in the education sector at UNESCO. So let's hear what she had to say.
But we think that a behavioral science approach can improve the uptake of data and scientific evidence for decision making in education. And we think that one of the first things we need to do is to sensitize colleagues about this. So to get started, what we decided to do was to begin with a landscape review of how the behavioral sciences have informed the work of other international organizations, such as UNICEF, the World Health Organization, and the World Bank. A very preliminary scan is showing that behavioral sciences have been used within education projects, but used primarily for health interventions. Still, this shows potential that we can, in fact, use behavioral sciences in education projects, in particular around getting teachers to change their teaching practices, which is a major challenge. So, for example, teachers might still be using some outdated teaching practices, such as asking kids to memorize content, which would appear in an exam.
So what we're seeing here is the use of applied behavioral psychology to change how teachers teach, taking away the inspiration and the passion that they might have had from teaching in the past, but they're going to teach them how they should be teaching instead, and also to make sure that students don't have to do things like take exams, because that's not fair to students, right? We wouldn't want to make sure that they knew anything. Another example of the use of behavioral science in UN 2.0 is a behavioral change service called Verified. Apparently, this is, quote, delivering science-based information in times of crises in an era of prolific mis- and disinformation. There's a bit of information on the Quintet of Change website. It is a UN initiative, but as I said, it's got a part UN, but also part this organization called Purpose. And we can put a screenshot of Purpose's homepage on the screen here. It is apparently working hard to cut through the noise around global crises and deliver critical fact-based advice and information. As they say here on their very obvious black and white homepage, they use creative storytelling and campaigns to move people to remake the world. Don't forget it, very large letters. Other partners of Purpose include the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the Rockefeller Foundation, of course. As I was looking into Behavioral Science Week, I ended up coming across something that I had never heard of before, which is the United Nations University, or as I'll call it, UN Uni. As a former professor who now watches what globalists do instead of teaching at a university, I was surprised to find out that UN Uni existed, so I decided to look into it a bit more. Their homepage says they work on evidence-based solutions for a sustainable future, because of course they do. Looking into it a little bit more, I found that the university encompasses 13 institutes located in 12 countries around the world. Their research and academic activities are aligned with every sustainable development goal, which are people, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnerships. So, of course, this is all starting to sound familiar because they say the same thing everywhere. Their headquarters is based in Tokyo. They have institutes in 11 other countries. So, of course, it's global. Students, if you want to be a student at this university, you can undertake research that links directly with the work of the UN and its agencies. For example, you can get a PhD in sustainability science. You can do a part-time PhD in the Netherlands. You can get a PhD in innovation economics and governance for sustainable development. And you can also get an MSc in sustainability or public policy and human development, or the geography of environmental risks and human security. And there are also non-degree courses and other training. If you want to know how much you would have to pay to do this, it varies by institute. So just like me, the UN Uni is celebrating its 50th birthday this year. Here's a quote from the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, who's celebrating the birthday. And on his website, he said, "For half a century, university leaders, staff, students, and alumni have driven peace and progress by bridging the worlds of education, research, and policy, by acting as a trusted source for evidence-based policymaking, and by uniting the world through knowledge and partnerships that address our most pressing global challenges. The United Nations University is truly multilateralism in action." So I found this UNU Merit, which is one of the institutes, talking about their contribution to the Behavioral Change Week last week. And that's how I found out about what was going on at the UN Uni. So just to see what it would be like if you wanted to be a student at UN Uni, I've got a couple of clips from their YouTube channel. This one is called, it's from a lecture called "A Cup of Tea for the SDGs." So let's learn from this lady.
So how the SDG could help navigate these complex tea terrains, and actually the SDG could help tea tell its story. They are the impact, the SDGs are the impact that the tea industries and we as a tea consumer working to achieve. So the success of achieving a sustainable tea sector is actually hinge on our ability to balance SDG 12, which is responsible consumption and productions, and in our effort to enable economic development, or SDG 8, for the tea smallholders, and in a way that can conserve the life on land, which is SDG 15. So all of this effort should be done within the effort to alleviate poverty, SDG 1, and to achieve food security, and SDG 2, and to combat climate change, which is SDG 13.
So there's your lecture. If you wanted to know what kind of research they do before you decided to apply, here's a video from February explaining a new report called "Disaster Risks 2025, Turning Over a New Leaf," which was written by UN Uni's Institute for Environment and Human Security. And it found that redefining what we value is one of 5 fundamental changes that humanity needs to make to shift towards a more sustainable and resilient world. So let's watch the summary video.
The world faces many serious threats: climate change, pollution, biodiversity loss, and inequalities, to name a few. We know what needs to be done to change course, so why aren't we doing it? The answer lies in society's deeper structures and assumptions that create the outcomes we see all around us. Take, for instance, spraying aerosols into the stratosphere to reflect sunlight back to space. This attempt to limit global warming is called solar geoengineering. Some governments and companies are exploring it as a way to combat climate change. But the actions of a few could lead to negative impacts for others around the world. Unpredictable weather patterns, food and water insecurity. It's also a superficial fix that fails to address the underlying causes of climate change. We prioritize our own benefits, willing to accept negative impacts elsewhere. To truly solve the problem, we need to look at how we interact with each other across the globe. When we move beyond self-serving solutions and recognize our own responsibility, the real solution is clear. Cutting out emissions directly by phasing out fossil fuels. We have the power to change the world for the better. Let's turn over a new leaf.
So apparently we're going to spray the skies eventually, and we're also going to phase out fossil fuels, which we know Keir Starmer announced that last week. I have a little bit more later on in the news on geoengineering, but right now, Charles, what do you think? Would you go to uni?
People you will have recruited to the university in that segment, Dan. I'm guessing probably not that many, but thank you very much nonetheless.